Welcome to the Oakdale Grove social meetup for July. This is the day after the 40th anniversary of the tornado that went through Fridley, Minnesota, and we're going to do a bit of a presentation about that today. I am Giant Sycamore Bear. That is my druid name. You can just call me JT if you don't know me from druidry. We are in Springbrook Nature Center here in Fridley, where the birds are happily announcing our presence, more that they're upset that we're here, I think. But we're going to be talking about the tornado as it happened and where it happened. So the tornado did not start here in Springbrook. It actually started across the river in Brooklyn Park, Minnesota. It was a weak tornado at first, and one of the places that was damaged was Kirby Puckett's house, who was a Twins star at the time for baseball. And then the tornado moved across the Mississippi River, and once it did, it started to strengthen quite dramatically from a weak an F0 tornado to an F2. And we will be pointing out some areas here in the park where you can actually still see the damage 40 years on. So we're going to start out taking off, and as we do, I am going to give a bit of a background on what was happening that day that led to that EF2 tornado. As we're walking through here, it's similarly warm to what earlier in the day was on July 17th, 1986. By the time the tornado and that thunderstorm had formed, it was actually up in the upper 90s. Dew points were in the upper 70s. So the weather that we were having here in Minnesota is more representative of South Texas. It was extremely humid, extremely oppressive, and there was a area of thunderstorms, a little upper air disturbance that was moving through, and the storms originally were moving through central Minnesota. They came southeast towards the Twin Cities. At that time, there was nothing severe going on. What happened over the next few minutes somehow was caught by sheer dumb luck. The KARE 11 news team had sent their helicopter up to get aerial footage of the Minneapolis Aquatennial. This is an event that happens every year in Minneapolis. And they were up traveling from Anoka Blaine Airport down to the Aquatennial, and the photographer saw a tornado. Immediately put the camera on it and told control, hey, I've got a tornado forming. They took it live, and you saw the tornado basically entirely from start to finish. It was the first time a tornado had ever been caught through its entire life cycle, and it turned out to be some of the most impactful meteorological footage taken in the 80s, and showed a lot of the development of tornado structure. We were lucky as meteorologists because it also showed that that was a multi-vortex tornado, meaning there were multiple suction tubes inside the main funnel. All of that was new to science. The inflow jets that come into the tornado itself, new to science. So everybody's like, oh yeah, great video from KARE 11. Oh, that was amazing. I'm like, yeah, it was amazing video because we'd never seen that before, and it was broadcast on. The tornado happened starting at 4:58 p.m. Right as the 5 o'clock news started, boom, KARE 11's got it live. They basically, and there's video of it on TwinCitiesMediaNow.com, but you see, they cut to the anchor desk, and you just see Paul Majors go, tonight we're throwing all formalities out the window. And they tossed it to Paul Douglas in the Weather Center, and they just went live with that video for 30 minutes. Tornado ended about 5:30. I mean, it was perfect. I mean, you couldn't have scheduled that tornado any better for a live newscast. Of interest to that was KARE 11 was in third place at the time. They had just changed to be KARE 11. Previously, they were WUSA, and they were trailing badly behind Channel 4 and Channel 5 for the news. And all of a sudden, they had this footage, and KARE 11 was #1 within a month and stayed there for years after. So it was very good for them. But we're going to start walking through here, and we're going to quickly come up on the first area where you can really start to see the damage from the tornado. And while we get there, one of the things that stood out was the thunderstorm had that classic look of a supercell, but it did not have a full hook echo. And part of that was also because of the nature of the radar technology of the day. We did not have Doppler radar at that time. So all you saw was a static two-dimensional view of what the storm was doing. We could tell it was an extremely heavy rain producer, but that was it. You can't see it to our right as we're walking, but to the left, there is a large open clearing, and that is part of the tornado damage from where the tornado came through. As it crossed the river, it came across, and as it strengthened, it got over here to East River Road, Green River Boulevard. Can't remember which one. East River Road over here. Thank you, John. East River Road. As it did, it got even stronger, and that's when it moved here into Springbrook Park, and it strengthened fully into an EF2 at that point. But the other thing is it stalled. The storm basically stopped moving. It took almost 20 minutes to go from East River Road to its dissipation about a half mile to our east. But think about that strength moving through a forested area. The video footage shows entire trees getting pulled out of the ground and sucked into the tornado. There's a reason these clearings are like this. It's because everything was pulled out of the ground. There was nothing left but grass.
So we're literally on the path.
We are on the path. We are standing in the middle of the path. So yeah, I mean, some of it's replanted. You can tell by the age of the trees too. If you look, even the oaks, like there's an oak behind us. It's a very young oak. But if you go like a quarter mile to our east, you'll start seeing 100-year-old oaks, 150-year-old oaks. And it's very easy to tell where the tornado damage occurred. Yep. So in Springbrook, there were an estimated 5,000 to 10,000 trees that were damaged, including 1/2 of the preserve around us. So it was not a small storm. It was surveyed. It was surveyed as an F2 on the old Fujita scale. They've changed that quite a bit with a new enhanced or EF scale. And with that, I don't know if it would still be considered an F2. It may be downgraded to an EF1 because part of that is it looks a lot at structure damage. Sorry, I got that backwards. The F scale was mostly damage to structures. The new enhanced Fujita scale looks also at landscape damage, tree damage. Was there suction vortices on the ground? Was the ground stripped bare? Was pavement lifted? Those are markers of an extremely strong tornado. That kind of thing was not looked at in the old F scale. I still wonder if it would become an EF1 based on the fact that it was just mostly tree damage. Though given the fact that all the trees were sucked up and torn out, I could see EF2, they might even go EF3. I haven't dove that deep into the damage matrix. But this is a map of the path. Let's show it to the camera real quick so you can see that. Okay.
Where's the UR here?
There isn't one, unfortunately, because it'd be kind of hard to do. But, sorry, we are about right, water, about right here.
Okay.
So we are just coming into the main mark here. Sorry, I'm going to have to juggle because that's dripping water on me. Oh, perfect. So, I don't know if you can see it on camera. We'll show an overlay of this in post-production. But you can see the hashed area. That was the damage area. There's the thin dotted line right here. It says Vortex Center. That is actually the center path of the tornado. But with the satellite tornadoes that were around it and the multiple vortices, what you have is you have these little suction currents around it, and you have multiple points of spin that are pulling debris up. So that's the center line of the storm, but then you have damage all around it because of the actual size of it and the multi-vortex nature of the tornado. In Brooklyn Park alone, so just across the river on the west side in Hennepin County, damage was in excess of $500,000 in 1986 dollars. So it would be about $1.5 million today. In the Anoka County side, the side we're in, damage was basically confined to the park. There were a couple of houses that were hit and damaged, but nothing like what happened in Brooklyn Park. And we covered our friends at Care 11. Yeah, I wasn't sure how well you'd be able to see it.
Yeah.
So if you look, I kind of, pardon me if I nudge into the camera with the shoulder, you can kind of see right in the center, right here, you can see there's taller trees on either side, and there's an area of shorter trees. That shorter trees are where the path was of the tornado. So it actually came through, and it was right in this area where it really kind of stalled and expanded. And so that's why you see younger trees over here, then older trees over there. I should say older trees over here, older trees over there, and then the younger trees in the middle. Now, the storm did deviate a little. So what you see is the storm was coming basically this way. moving due east. As it got in this area, it actually turned. It started moving a bit more southeasterly. So it was really lucky. If it continued straight east, it would have hit several big warehouses. Target has a very large warehouse just on the other side of the preserve here. So that would have been all damaged. And there's quite a bit of commercial just along Highway 47 over here. This is 65.
That is
University Avenue, which is 65, 47, 47. Okay. Lived here for
65 is central.
lived here for 30 years. I still can't tell the difference between Central and University being 47 and 65.
And I would add that even in the video, the helicopter pilots were uncertain of what road that was as well. They were making
They
the
were.
exact
That's
same.
hilarious.
That is actually one of the things that was brought up was the safety of Max, who was flying the plane, the helicopter. When the news team was asking him on the air where he was, he didn't know. He was actually dipping down almost to street level so he could see the street signs to report back where he was, and he would go back up. And he constantly had to move because the tornado was moving. And as it got stronger and as these multiple vortex parts became visible and the inflow jets became more visible, he had to very much know exactly where he was. And I'm assuming, and this is strictly an assumption, that somebody in the control room was telling him kind of a movement idea of where it was moving so he knew where to be. Because otherwise he would not have really had a good reference for where the storm was going. Because you're looking at this thing against a backdrop of 500,000 trees or whatever is here in the preserve, it would have been very hard to tell where you were. You'll notice that the path continues more to the southeast. And if you look up, you can see this oak tree is very damaged. There are very few limbs outside of the main trunks. Those were stripped off by the tornado. You can also see the two younger trees over here have nothing on the east side. And if you look up at this oak tree, you see the same thing. There's not a lot of side limbs. It's mostly limbs that are on the east side because the tornado would have passed to its left. Now, yeah, the pale dots that are being pointed to, those are damage scars where limbs were cut off that were damaged. And some of them, you notice, aren't perfect little spheres. That's where the limbs were literally ripped off and the tree healed over it. Now, you'll notice that this little pocket right here is a very narrow damage path that we can see. This would have been one of the multiple suction vortices inside the tornado, what makes it a multi-vortex. That's where this would have passed. We're actually standing inside the path of the tornado and seeing the path of one of the little vortexes in it. That is why you can't judge a tornado by its look. This was a very photogenic little storm. I mean, it was a cute little tornado. It looked really pretty. It's like, oh, this doesn't look bad. It was an EF2, or it was an F2 tornado, and it had multiple vortices in it that were doing incredible damage on the ground. But it looked, I mean, if you looked at it from a distance, like, oh, okay, that's not too bad. And a lot of people would have at that point because it was pale white. It looked, I don't want to say friendly, but it looked kind of friendly. I mean, you see some tornadoes and they're a half a mile wide and it looks like just a finger of God pushing along. Like, I'm going to get into the ground or I'm going to die. This looked like something like, oh, here, I'm playing this kind of thing. And it looked very, very tame by tornado standards. But yet, we can see all around us what happened. You'll notice even here along the water, you've got a lot of young trees. And as I was saying, if you look here from the bridge, we're going to walk out in the middle of this bridge and see our lovely overheated duckweed. Look straight out. Oh, we're going to detail here. We're going to take a look at some swans and cygnets.
Yeah.
So we've got cygnets swimming around behind Mom. Looks like there might be a couple of ducks out there. Yeah, it's ducks out to the left. Or maybe those are cygnets. I can't tell. Yeah, so I'm not sure. But yeah, so. Okay. And then farther off in the distance, there are more birds. Can't tell what they are from this distance. But, oh, okay. So looking off to the southeast here from our vantage point on the bridge, you can see all of the poplars and birches off in the distance. And you notice the trees are very short right here. And this is because that's where that main track line of the path the damage was. And that's why I pointed out, we have not walked more than maybe 50 yards from where that little vortex path was that we talked about just a couple of minutes ago. Now we're in the main track. We're going to continue walking across this bridge, and you can see how young the trees are through here. Even the oaks are very young. And we can walk all the way through the preserve here on this trail, and you really don't leave the damage path of the tornado until you're right up against Springbrook Nature Center, the new building. But yeah, as I say, this tree has scars. You can see where limbs were clipped off of it. And you'll notice that most of these trees are very young. And while we haven't walked very far, we're actually starting to quickly approach the end path of the damage. The storm was still strong. It was still a strong tornado, F2 or an F2, but it kind of stalled in this area. And what happened, you had little suction vortices and inflow jets were the bigger damage here, in that you had the storm spinning, and what happens is it will get little pockets of air that get pulled into it very rapidly. They're called inflow jets because they're flowing in. But those inflow jets can take your background wind from 20 to 30 miles an hour, and suddenly you've got a pocket of winds that are moving 90 to 110 miles an hour. That will do substantial tree damage as well. So there are pockets of tree damage through here, but they're not this more sustained, organized path that you see farther to the west. But that is pretty much a walkthrough of the path through Springbrook Nature Preserve of the 40th for the 17th of July tornado in 1986 on almost its 40th. Is today the 17th?
Yeah, I believe so.
Today's the 18th. I thought it was. Hi, this is a meteorologist admitting an error. It was July 18th, 1986. I was wrong. So we are on the 40th anniversary to the day of the tornado here in Fridley, Minnesota. One of the things that stood out about this tornado is there were absolutely zero warnings on the storm ahead of it. It wasn't until the Carol 11 copter got it on video, it was seen by the National Weather Service at the weather office at the airport, that a tornado warning was issued. Tornado was already on the ground. That was not uncommon in 1986 and into the late 80s. The nature of the Doppler radar really wouldn't allow for advanced warnings because the radar couldn't see inside the storm structure. And this poor tree took a beating. As you look up, you can see quite a bit of damage up through it as well. You can see a lot of limbs were ripped out and damaged. Here's our solo maple. You can tell it's a survivor because it's much bigger than everything else around it.
The maple tree is tilted at the base, and then for the last 40 years, it has continued to find its way back up
Toward the sun.
I will say thank you to everyone who has watched this, who is here in attendance. Thank you all for coming out. Again, I am Johann Sycamore Bear. I will not give my social media for my weather projects because that would be tacky.
Be tacky. Do it.
I am at Black Sheep Weather on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Blue Sky, and Tumblr. Yeah, I'm on all those things. And there is an automated system that runs. If it's anything that is in our primary county warning area, which is basically all of the southern half of Minnesota, except for the extreme southwest. So areas right next to Sioux Falls we don't cover. But everything else we do into western Wisconsin, from Rice Lake and Bloomer all the way down to Buffalo and Trempealeau counties by Wabasha. That is my shameless self-promotion of Black Sheep Weather. Like, follow, subscribe is what I always say. So